Oh boy. And good afternoon. It's 5:25. Haiti Oropesa with Florida You Judge, and we will be starting shortly in 5 minutes. We are also waiting for Candice Colucci. She advised that she'd be jumping on as she's on the road headed back to her office here in the Tampa Bay area. Hopefully, she'll be able to join us as scheduled. Um, but I'm here already with two of my guests. Chris Ingram, thanks for joining. Gretchen, Catherine, same to you. And in 5 minutes, we are going to begin a discussion about Governor Ron DeSantis's recent proposed legislation. Everybody, that's been the talk of the week. Everybody's been sending me, when it first came out, the day that it came out a couple of days ago, they started texting me, messaging me, telling me, "Did you see this? This is out of control." Governor Ron DeSantis's proposed legislation, in response to the protests that we've been seeing for some months now, not only nationally but locally. So that's going to be interesting to see if the legislature is going to pass these proposed pieces of legislation by Ron DeSantis. And we have two different perspectives. Chris Ingram is more on the conservative side. Gretchen Catherine, I'm going to go ahead and take a guess and say that she's more on the opposing liberal side. So hopefully we have good, vigorous discussion on these proposed pieces of legislation. So these are laws that impact all of us um, as Floridians. There's some legislation here that I'm reading that seems a little bit concerning. I would say, as a Floridian, as an American citizen, that they've even caused me to concern whether if they are passed, whether I should be concerned about some of my activism. So we're 3 minutes away from the start of our discussion. Again, we're going to be discussing for at least 30 minutes, and we're going to be taking call-ins too. You can see now at the bottom of the screen what the call-in number is. It's 813-221-9700. Again, my name is Haiti Oropesa with Florida You Judge, and I have two great guests on today. We're going to have a substantive conversation on this. This is very important. Chris Ingram is very, very involved. He's a political analyst, commentator. He has been on Big News 9. He has an outlet that I've been following, the journalist, and Gretchen Cawthorn is an attorney, a local attorney, Tampa Bay. She started her career. She has a very lengthy background in criminal justice issues, but I believe, if I'm correct, Gretchen, you began as a public defender when you graduated from law school, yes?
Yes, my first job after law school was as a public defender.
And
But
so,
I started in criminal justice as a forensic scientist about 15 years ago.
very interesting. And so then now you're doing solo practice. And do you want to tell the public what areas you cover?
Yes, right now I am in solo practice. I am continuing to work on wrongful conviction cases and on criminal defense cases. I also work in some civil rights cases, but my solo practice now is more focused into landlord tenant and small business civil disputes, things like that.
Great, great. Okay, so we're 1 minute away. 1 minute away, please. For those of you that have started watching, um, start sharing with your friends, anyone that you think that might be interested in this subject matter, the proposed legislation that Governor Ron DeSantis announced this week that he is proposing, and the legislature now during the next legislative session it will yet to be seen whether they will jump on board with some of this proposed legislation, which some people seem to think is outrageous. Some people think that it's appropriate because of what they've been seeing um, in protests here locally. Protests right now. There's protests happening on the heels of the decisions that were made on the Breonna Taylor case. So we've been seeing a lot of that nationally. Um, and so we're gonna have a discussion. There's three sections, and we're gonna go ahead and start. It's 5:30, and we're going to go ahead and start again. Good afternoon, Haiti Oropesa, with me, Chris Ingram, and attorney Gretchen Cawthorn, and we're gonna start talking about the proposed legislation. For those of you that are watching, you can call in 813-221-9700 if you have, or even in the comments section. We already have a comment. Kimberly DeFalco. Hi, Haiti, Gretchen, and Chris. Looking forward to this. Hi, Kimberly DeFalco. Always good to hear from you. You beautiful soul. So let's just start off. Chris and Gretchen, I'm going to let you all go back and forth about this proposed legislation. There's 3 sections. So the first section is new criminal offenses to combat rioting, looting, and violence is how the governor's office titled that section. So we have 5 parts, A, B, C, D, E. The first one is prohibition on violent or disorderly assemblies, which would make it, if passed, again, this is not the law yet. Governor DeSantis hopes for it to be. That part A would make it a 3rd-degree felony when 7 or more persons are involved in an assembly and cause damage to property or injury to another person. So again, if you're in a group 7 or more and you're involved in an assembly of protest and it causes damage to property or injury to other person's, 3rd-degree felony. Is that a good idea, Chris?
I think it's a response to the current situation that makes it absolutely necessary and in order. I think that it's justified. I think that the citizens of this state are sick and tired of seeing their homes, their communities, their businesses, their streets overrun by people who have no respect for the rule of law. They clearly have no respect for other people. They clearly have no respect for other people's property, and they don't know how to control themselves. And they're disorderly, and it's borderline on anarchy. I've seen this right here in our own community in Tampa. I live just a few blocks away from Hyde Park area where some of these anarchist movements have taken place, where people think that they have the right to go into the middle of a street and assemble, which is a violation of Florida law. They effectively are holding people hostage by not allowing them to leave, blocking them in their cars. We saw a video of this a week or so ago with the woman who worked at CVS or Walgreens, who was boxed in and was hit by these protesters in her car. She was fearing for her life. I think that the legislative suggestion of the governors that we have these very concrete and substantial penalties for people who have no respect for the law, no respect for private property, no respect for other citizens. They ought to throw the damn book at him, and I congratulate the governor for his effort.
Gretchen.
Thank you, Haiti. I think that outlawing an assembly of 7 or more people is completely unconstitutional.
That's not what this does. That's not what this does, Gretchen.
Let her finish.
If you're going to mischaracterize what the governor said, I'm going to call you out on it, because it doesn't say that 7 people can't do something. It
Chris, don't interrupt me.
I know, but let her finish.
Read what the governor said. Read what he said again, Haiti, because that's what Gretchen just characterized as is not what the governor's proposed legislation says.
Listen, I'm going to welcome. Hold on, Gretchen. I'm going to welcome vigorous conversation, discussion, back and forth. We're going to all be heard. You're fired up, Chris. I know, we heard you. You're applauding.
We're going to have a good discussion. We can have a good discussion, but let's stick to the facts and not inject liberal rhetoric, because
you can have a moment to respond,
Chris. Is not true.
Chris, you can have a moment to respond after she's done. I understand. I knew you'd have a problem with it. You're right, and I will restate it.
If you
Chris, let's be respectful.
I'm absolutely respectful.
I'm not saying you're being disrespectful, but let's be. Come on, I gave you full floor. You're gonna get that again.
Well, I didn't say anything that wasn't factual or my opinion.
But let her finish your statement. Let her finish your statement.
It's factual, and it's not.
Chris,
the proposed law does not say
Chris, we can interrupt each other the whole time through.
And protest.
I'm the host. Are you gonna disrespect me? Come on, man. Let her answer the thing. I get it. It's 7 or more.
Stick to the facts,
you can respond to her after she's done and say where she's wrong in her response. Gretchen, please go. Have your turn.
Okay. Can I speak without you interrupting me, Chris? Because I'm not going to even continue.
Gretchen, what do you think about?
If you continue to interrupt me, I'm just off. Okay. So you need to be respectful. Chris.
I'm respectful. Stick to the facts.
No, you're not. You're interrupting me. Let a woman finish a sentence.
Please.
The audience deserves to hear facts, not misconstrued.
Let me speak, and then you can respond.
Okay? Go ahead. Spout your
Be
life.
respectful. Can you mute him, Haiti?
I am.
Until I finish speaking.
Dude, I don't want to mute you, Chris. Come on, you're forcing me to mute. Just let her.
All right. No, because I'm being extremely respectful. I just want Gretchen to stick to facts. She stated
I haven't even finished the sentence, Chris. You have not allowed me to finish a sentence.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Gretchen, respond.
Thank you. I am going to read it word for word. Prohibition on violent or disorderly assemblies. It's a third-degree felony when 7 or more persons are involved in an assembly and cause damage to property or injury to other persons. Right. What this is outlining is assembling 7 or more people.
No.
Chris,
well, they have to cause damage.
Right, they have to cause damage.
But it's also anybody who's there is going to be affected, not just the person who causes the damage. So they're outlawing and they're making it a felony.
Do you think she has a point?
It's a very hard charge.
I would be a little bit inhibited to join a protest when I'm on board with the cause, and then somebody tweaks out and goes cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And I didn't intend for that to happen, but I just happened to be in a group of 7 people, and there was a nutso or a person out of order in doing something that I did not want done. And all of a sudden, I'm swept into the paddy wagon and hauled off to jail. Is there a problem with that, Chris?
The fact of the matter is, in most of these cases, it's not one person out of 7 or one person out of 20 that's doing these things to people and assaulting people and damaging property and violating state law. It's a mass gathering of people doing all of the aforementioned. It's not just one person out of 7.
I understand. Okay, so your scenario, Chris, and you understand, we'll have all these prosecutors, all these law enforcement that they're going to apply and interpret the reading of the legislation how they want to, and sometimes be wrong when it's later challenged in court. But then after, somebody has to be arrested, pay for an attorney, bond out, have their booking photo on thing. So Gretchen makes a good point. I'm going to be inhibited, Chris, if I think that I'm going to be in a group of people where I'm protesting a legitimate issue and people in that crowd start going in a way that I do not approve of or agree to, in that they're going to start destroying stuff or hurting people. I'm out. I'm going to be the first one. But what if I'm not out soon enough and there's a cop there and I get swept up and arrested? Is that a problem? Should the legislation be clear as to that? They have to, each person has to either be caught destroying or hurting before they get arrested.
My suggestion to you or to anyone would be, know who your friends are, and before you go join some sort of a protest rally, know who you're hanging out with and what kind of character they are. Because if they're the type of person that's going to end up potentially getting themselves arrested by their illegal behavior, then you probably ought not to be hanging out with them, would be my first suggestion to you or anyone else. Second of all, it's highly unlikely that the police are going to go around arresting innocent bystanders who are not party to criminal activity. This law is intended to enforce existing law and to make it clear that these people who are violating laws, not respecting people, not respecting property, lack discipline, lack respect for civil discourse, there needs to be an appropriate mechanism to clear the premises. And we have seen a failure of that in our own community here in Tampa, with Tampa's police and Jane Castor, our mayor, not strictly enforcing the law, allowing these protesters to illegally congregate on public roads, blocking streets, blocking access to emergency vehicles, blocking commerce and the people to have the free flow of their choice to where they want to go in a public road where people are assembling illegally. And we need to put a stop to this madness.
Gretchen, respond.
I think that what he just said is absolutely ridiculous. I spoke to Chief Albano about the May 30th incident in Temple Terrace that proceeded over by USF, where riots did begin. He said that there was very peaceful protests and that it was outsiders who were not involved in the protest who came in and started the rioting. It was not the protesters, it was outsiders. So when you're grouping everybody who's in a certain location together, you're grouping in people who are there to legitimately express their First Amendment right to protest with people who come in from the outside who were the ones who caused the damage to the stores, set Champs on fire. Those people were not part of the actual protest. So it's overly vague and it's grouping everyone together. And as for what Chris is saying about South Tampa, I was a legal observer on June 13th for the march that went from Fred Ball through Hyde Park and circled Hyde Park and went back. There were thousands of people in that march. Tampa Police Department did know that we were closing down the streets, and the march actually split open. People moved to allow an ambulance come through. So what you're saying is absolutely incorrect.
No, it's not. It's not
with these marches.
It's
So
not
maybe
correct
they're,
that they were
Chris, you're cutting me off again.
They were illegally
Chris,
assembled.
you need to
that
learn to
actually
respect
told
women.
the police department that they were
Chris?
there, and that the police knew it
Chris?
doesn't make it
Okay,
a
hold on,
legal
Gretchen. Let
assembly.
him finish, and then you can.
It doesn't make it a legal assembly. It was an illegal assembly. The Tampa Police Department, part of the problem and the reason why we need these stricter state laws is because we have weak people like Mayor Castor and Tampa Police that don't enforce the existing law. The mere fact that the protesters told the police that they're going to be there doesn't make it a legal assembly. It doesn't give them the right to block a public road, which is a violation of Florida statute.
Let's talk about the blocking of the traffic. And is it reasonable, Gretchen? I'm going to let you respond. Let her respond, Chris, please. Is it reasonable to vet everyone when you're deciding on joining a protest? Is it reasonable to vet every single person, people that you don't even know, to see if that's a protest that you want to join?
Absolutely not. And I can tell you as a legal observer, having been at that particular protest on the 13th, where there were thousands of people, people as the protest went up Bayshore and then crossed over and went up Howard, people were coming out of their houses. We had people coming out of restaurants joining in. People came out of, there was a little old lady who was so adorable. She came out of CVS and walked up to me and asked what was going on, and she joined in. No, you know, the majority of us, when I went to that protest, I knew there were about a dozen legal observers, attorneys that we volunteered to go as legal observers. I knew them. Outside of them, I didn't know the other 4,000 people that were marching at Bayshore.
Two questions. The first one for you and the second one for Chris. The first one, Gretchen, is for you. Is blocking traffic an okay method of protest?
Yes. Historically, the blocking of traffic is a historical protest maneuver. Think about John Lewis crossing the bridge. It is a historical protest maneuver. It's used to get the attention of people who are otherwise not affected by what is being protested. In this case, by police brutality.
March across the bridge, was that organized in a manner to not? I can't speak to that. I'm going to have to do my research on that point, honestly. But okay, so
yes. But even Katie, think back to the Women's March. Think back to women's suffrage, to civil rights, to desegregation. All of these huge civil rights protests, streets are blocked, highways are blocked. You have huge thousands and thousands of people, huge crowds blocking streets, marching through the streets.
It talks about this proposed legislation talks about it being permitted. Should you get a permit when you're going to block traffic? And so then my question would be, if they're not permitted, is it okay with blocking traffic when it's against the law? And you know that that's true because you're an attorney and you're up on that aspect of the law. It's illegal. Should you get a permit in order to block off traffic? So that
ideally,
know
yes.
in advance that that's not a route that they're going to be able to travel through because it's blocked. They will be blocked during that time and day.
Yes, ideally, and in Hillsborough County and in Tampa, you should be getting a permit.
Okay, so are you okay with doing it when you don't have a permit?
I'm okay with people doing it, but they're going to face the consequences if they are cited for being in the street and blocking traffic.
Okay, so do you think it's an appropriate law enforcement response to arrest somebody that's blocking traffic when they're not permitted?
Arrest, I would prefer to see a notice to appear. I think arresting someone for blocking traffic is just the process of booking, and arresting someone is a huge taxpayer expense.
Okay, charge with a notice to appear.
Yeah, I would say cite them, give them a citation.
This one's for Chris. This question, Chris, is it okay for drivers to hit protesters even if they are blocking traffic?
Well, first of all, I want to say it sounds like Gretchen and I actually agree. Historical, whatever has been done with regard to blocking traffic at protests notwithstanding, that's not the issue here, what has been done historically. What we're arguing here is the law and the proposed law, the existing law and the proposed law. And it sounds like we agree that these protesters, if they want to block a street, they ought to go get a permit to do so. That's all I'm asking for. I'm all for people exercising their First Amendment rights, their free speech and assembly, and to protest. Absolutely. Go about it in a lawful manner. That's all I'm saying. And taking over streets and being anarchists is not the solution to whatever problem you feel you've been aggrieved by. So I think that we're on the same page. And in regard to your question, Haiti, I think that when people feel like their lives are threatened and that they are being effectively held hostage by being blocked in by protesters, they're being assaulted by protesters with their automobiles. Their cars are being hit by hands and sticks and other things that people are carrying. And when people feel a person in a vehicle feels like their life is threatened and their physical property is threatened by these protesters, and they absolutely have a right, I think, to be able to drive through these protesters. I think they ought to do so cautiously. Get out of there slowly if possible and not hurt anyone. Make it clear that you are on the move, that your vehicle is moving, and that you intend to get out of that situation. And look, these people that are these protesters that get hit, so to speak, most of the time, they know what the hell they're doing. They know that if you play in a road, you're going to get hit. Any 4-year-old child knows, don't play out in the street. Cars come, they ride on roads, don't play in the street. If you don't have a legal right to be there, you might get hurt. If you don't have a permit to be in that road and blocking the traffic, if you're there legally, you won't be blocking traffic, so to speak, because the police will do it for you. So, yeah, I think that these protesters who get hit most of the time, I think that it's justifiable because people are fearful for their lives and they want to move on. Now, there have been some very egregious cases where I saw a video of some guy in a truck. He was 2 blocks down from where the protest intersection was actually happening. He drove in the opposite lane of traffic against the traffic and then ran through some protesters and hit someone. Clearly, that guy was not feeling like he was being threatened or that his life was in jeopardy. He was just annoyed. And that guy should be charged and dealt with appropriately. But when these situations get out of hand, as we've seen both here in Tampa and in Portland and everywhere in between where we've seen protests in larger cities, they need to understand that if you are out there and you are violating the law and you are playing in the street and you don't have a permit to be there, you could very well get hit. And for the most part, I come down on the right of the driver to exit a dangerous situation.
Gretchen.
Thank you. The hit and run incidents that have occurred at protests in Tampa, not other than there is some disputes with what happened with the CVS pharmacist recently. But the other incidents, the Jay Passmore being hit, that truck was a good block away when he decided to rev his engine, scream out obscenities and racial slurs, and run her down. The vehicle that hit Gatulo Gonzalez and Stuart Flores, that vehicle was at the Winn-Dixie on Swan and Albany, and decided to exit exit Winn-Dixie onto Albany, South Albany, and drive through the protest instead of exiting on Swan Avenue. He had 4 different exits from that Winn-Dixie, and he chose to go through the only one that would drive him through the protest.
Okay, somebody wants to make a comment. I like it when the public interacts. This is for you all, the public, we the people. Don't throw stuff at people. Don't burn other people's property. Don't harass private citizens in public. Don't block public streets. There, I fixed it. That's Bill Matul. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Thank you so much for weighing in. Robert Eckerd, one of my favorite top-notch criminal defense attorneys, a mentor to me. Love you, Robert. Thanks for weighing in. No intent for bystanders. And he also said no implied criminal intent by merely being close to someone, that you have no act in furtherance of criminal act. I think that was in response to what we were talking about in the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's see. Okay, let me ask this. One of the proposals is, Chris, do you think that TPD and law enforcement agencies that are not like right there on the spot as this is occurring and immediately disrupting the blocking of traffic, you think that there's blame there to place?
Oh, absolutely. I think that from the start, when we first saw some of these acts of anarchy after some peaceful demonstrations, particularly up in the USF area, as Gretchen referenced earlier, that the Tampa Police Department, by basically turning a blind eye and not enforcing the law about gathering in the streets, they basically showed the inmates that they're in charge of the asylum, and it just snowballed from there. Whereby we've seen a lot of people think that they have the absolute right to get out in the middle of a road and to block it without a permit. And that's a function of the police not functioning, doing their due diligence and knowing what's going on and enforcing existing law, Florida state law that says you cannot stand in the middle of a street without a permit.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you this, and then I'm gonna give some time to Gretchen to answer some of two questions at least that I have for her. One, Chris, do you agree then with the in part three of the proposed legislation by DeSantis, victim compensation? It would waive sovereign immunity to allow a victim of crime related to a violent or disorderly assembly to sue local government for damages where the local government is grossly negligent in protecting persons and property. Do you agree with that? Sovereign
I,
immunity
I,
gone, boom, they can get hit for
I
whatever.
absolutely support that. And of course, for those who don't know, sovereign immunity is basically law that says that you can't sue a government, a local, municipal, or state government without that government's permission to be sued, effectively, is a short version of how that is. So this would take that away. So it disincentivizes, by removing sovereign immunity, it disincentivizes the communities like Tampa from not enforcing existing law, because they know if they don't enforce existing law now under the DeSantis proposal, they could be sued. And that's
Gretchen,
a
what
good
are your
thing.
thoughts about that? And then I'm going to ask you another question, Gretchen.
So, my thoughts on that, I don't think we should have sovereign immunity at all. I think that we should always be able to sue the government. But in regards to what's going on in Tampa specifically, the police, all the police, the sheriff's office and the chief of police, they were taken aback by what happened on the 30th of May. That's the only rioting that we've had in Tampa. Since then, there have been, I believe, Andrew Warren said over 200 arrests for people that they have determined who were involved in the rioting and looting. Subsequent, Tampa Police Department did start showing up in force in riot gear at peaceful protests. You may remember back in June, some 67 people were arrested, and subsequently all their charges were dropped by the state attorney because it was determined that they were peacefully protesting. They were not rioting. Again, Jay Passmore's charges were dropped. Stuart Flores's charges have been dropped. TPD has been responding more appropriately. They are there. For instance, on the 13th, when I arrived at Fred Ball Park prior to the protest, and we were scouting out, the bomb squad was there scouting out. And upon my arrival, on my way there, I saw TPD officers in parking lots. They were set up to be on call if needed. As we went down the roads, you would see several blocks up TPD waiting just to make sure that people stayed on the route that they were supposed to take. So you might not see them, but they're there. They were there when Stuart Flores was run over. They were there when they weren't there when Jay was run over, but they did arrive shortly afterwards.
And that person was never caught.
That person, the identity of the vehicle is known. However, the investigation is still ongoing, and the state attorney is actually investigating that now instead of Tampa Police Department.
I know you're probably going to have much to say about this, and Chris has already touched upon this question, so I'm going to let you have a chance, Gretchen, to respond to this. The proposal that a driver's not liable for injury or death caused if fleeing for safety from a mob. Do you think that similar to Stand Your Ground, that after it was enacted, and we've seen cases where that's not what was intended, for people to take a law and to be able to just go trigger happy and
Yes.
have some of the stories that we've read, some of them where it's just that's not what was intended. But and then now there's people that want to try to tweak, change, stand your ground. But with this, do you think that it's going to be a floodgate of people thinking that they could just run over because they're aggravated because they're going to arrive late home that day because they're being inconvenienced by uh a protesting group that is trying to make it inconvenient to bring attention to the issue of inequality or racial disparity in the country?
I think that this is it's a stunt maneuver pre-elections to drum up support for um, for extreme right wingers. We already have stand your ground. It's not something that needs that this you could drive through a crowd if you're in fear of your life is not a new law that needs to be added. And yes, it is going to rile up the crazy right wing vigilantes. We saw on July 4th, Noah Armstrong. He switched the plates on his vehicles and then went and drove through the July 4th protest on Dale Mabry. That's complete intent. He wasn't in fear of his life. He switched the plates on his vehicles to make it more difficult to determine who was driving the car. And then he was seen with a phone up like he was video recording as he was driving through the protest. And I think that putting a law like this on the books is just going to lead to more vigilantes like that.
Okay.
It's frightening. We already have stand your ground. If any of these drivers in the 4 incidents in Tampa were in fear for their life, that I didn't see that in any of the video. Even so, the one that happened most recently near the CVS on Howard, that woman, Melissa, the people that she hit were safety marshals that were trying to help her. And you can hear them in the video. We'll help you. This is how you turn around. And you see other cars up and turn around. They were helping people turn around. That wasn't the actual part, the protest march. Most of the organized protests, they have safety marshals ahead of the march and also behind the march. I know on the 13th, there were numerous women that were safety marshals on roller skates, way up ahead, blocks ahead of the marching protest, letting people know there's a protest coming. You can go this way, you can go that way, or you should turn around. So in none of the Tampa incidents have I seen someone being trapped in their car. I have seen that on national news, but I haven't witnessed that in Tampa.
I have on some.
Yeah, I have too. And I would also say, it's easy for you as a bystander, Gretchen, to watch a situation and think to yourself, well, she's not feeling threatened. But if you're not the actual person in that car with people who are standing around her, banging on her hood, yelling at her, doing other intimidation tactics, who are you or anyone else to judge whether or not the person inside that vehicle is actually feeling threatened? Look, this whole situation, if these protesters, these peaceful protesters, as you have characterized them, as I want to believe most of them are, if they would merely just follow the law and go down to the Tampa City Hall and city government office and apply for a permit to close down the road that they want to protest upon, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We wouldn't have the necessity for Governor DeSantis to submit this legislative proposal to reclaim our streets. We are a country of laws. And if you don't respect the rule of law, you ought to be locked up. And Gretchen, I'm actually kind of surprised and a little bit appalled that people with a law degree who are members of the Florida bar are out there as legal observers and aren't telling these people, hey, you know what, folks, you are breaking the law. And it seems to me you're almost complicit in their breaking of the law. And you could potentially subject yourself to a bar complaint in doing that, could you not?
I think you're forgetting that there's a First Amendment right to protest. That's a constitution. It's also in the Florida Constitution.
I'm not forgetting
People
that.
have the right to protest.
Absolutely.
You seem upset that people are in the road or some protests go on without a permit, and that's your big hang up.
Right.
That's not what this law is designed to do.
Yeah.
I know, Chris, I can advise a client all day long. That's breaking the law, but I can't control what they do.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's good for the legal profession.
How so? Because I've pro bono represented somebody and I didn't get paid a dime.
Exactly. I'm actually spending money representing people pro bono, and I'm not getting paid, Chris. So
you know what?
I don't know how you're.
It's good for lawyers. You know who it's good for? It's good for law-abiding citizens. Because if it weren't for defense attorneys holding government accountable so that they don't go over and overstep the boundaries of the Constitution, it's the citizenry that fails when there's not a group of people that do that, like us.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
all for
And Chris,
citizens
the whole point of the
exercising their right to
Constitution
protest
are
and to assemble, but do so in a legal manner.
the
Of
whole
course,
point
listen,
of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is to protect citizens against the government, not
Understood.
vice
Gretchen,
versa.
Gretchen, how
And
many
when
times?
And the government also has a duty to protect citizens and to protect their property and to not allow anarchists to go out and rule our streets. We're a
it's
nation of
agree
not
law.
with that.
anarchy, they're protesting unjust treatment and police brutality. It's not anarchy.
When you
But
go out there
Gretchen,
and
do you
surround
agree with
a
the wait,
woman
wait,
in
wait,
a
Chris,
vehicle, you are not
you
just
disagree
protesting,
with
you're intimidating.
Chris, Gretchen, do you agree with businesses being destroyed and people being hurt? I don't think you
With, I'm sorry?
do. You agree with businesses being destroyed and persons being hurt?
Absolutely not.
Okay,
No.
then you and Chris are in agreement on that.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but I'm saying Chris is saying just follow the law, pretty much shut up and don't protest.
That's not
But
what I
that
said.
goes against the very
That's not what I said
nature
at
of
all.
our Constitution.
That's not what I said at all. I said go out and get a permit to block a street like you're required to do. I didn't say that I'm against your right to protest. You're putting words in my mouth again.
Chris, do you agree with the proposal where you have to wait till the next morning to go in front of a judge instead of being able to bond out?
I'm sorry. Repeat that again, Haiti.
So there's a proposal in it, and I wish I could get up through all of these proposals. You told me you had a time kind of limitation.
Go ahead. I got a few more minutes.
Okay, great. So bail, no bond or bail until first appearance in court if charged with a crime related to participating in a violent or disorderly assembly. Rebuttable presumption against bond or bail after first appearance. So essentially, you have to wait. You can't bond out.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with that.
Okay, thank God. Woof. Thank you, Chris. Okay, Gretchen, I don't think I need to ask you that one. Yes?
Yeah, I think you know my views on bail.
First degree misdemeanor for a participant in a violent or disorderly assembly to harass or intimidate a person at a public accommodation such as a restaurant. There's no need to harass people. So
Right.
what are your thoughts on that, Chris? I'm going to assume take a guess that you are in agreement with that one.
Yeah, we ought to take a hard line on these people. Absolutely.
Gretchen, do you think that it's necessary to, when I'm trying to have dinner privately at a public accommodation with my family and then I'm going to have protesters harassing me, you think that's okay?
No, I don't. And actually, you speak on that now. I saw something earlier today. I believe it was on Beach Drive in St. Pete recently, where people were running up to couples and families at outdoor dining, and I think they took over the table of one couple, is what I saw. And I don't agree with that. There are better ways to voice your opinion, but I don't think harassing individual people they're not the problem. You know, you want to fight the government, fight the government.
Phyllis Hedrick Harris, to hold an organized protest, follow the law and secure a permit. Easy, please. That was either please or easy peasy. Chris and Gretchen, both of you. Defund the police. Early on, I know that there are some people that are in support of the Black Lives Matter movement that I heard through social media telling when the whole defunding idea, concept, demand, request came about, somebody said that's not the right way maybe to call it. The messaging, the title of the message is wrong. It's not defunding, it's reallocating. I thought that was a brilliant suggestion, advice to call it that instead of defunding, because that's not actually what they're calling for. Chris, this question's for you. The proposal it says if this passes, it prohibits state grants or aid to any local government that slashes the budget for law enforcement services. So that wording of the proposed legislation says slashing. Would it be okay with you if they don't slash, rather they take the budget as a whole and say part of this budget can go towards good social services? Like,
look, I think that this is a reach. I think that it's very vague. Now we have to define slash. Is that listed anywhere in any Florida statute? I highly doubt it. I think that there are better ways that the state government can help to ensure that local governments enforce the rule of law and maintain law and order without these types of very vague and broad brush strokes to suggest that funding is going to be withheld if police budgets are slashed. Look, as a conservative Republican, I am a big believer in local government rule, and that ought to be the first consideration, and for the state government to come in and to start saying this is how you need to conduct yourselves in terms of your police budgeting or your municipal budget in any vein. I think that's kind of an overstep. It's done obviously across states, Democrat or Republican. They all do it. They play this game, and I just think as a function of leaving local control local, that we ought to maintain that, and that this is quite a reach, and I don't support it as it's written.
Gretchen, I don't know that you're going to add anything different to. You all are on the same page
Yeah.
on that. It may be for the same reason, maybe for different reasons. Let's just move on. RICO liability. That sounds scary. RICO liability attaches to anyone who organizes or funds a violent or disorderly assembly. Listen to that, folks. So you're not, may not even be there present, but if you organize it in any way or fund it, you can find yourself with pretty serious criminal charges. Your thoughts, Chris, and then Gretchen.
Look, I'm not an attorney. I know that the RICO statute has been very effective in disrupting organized crime networks. I'm not convinced yet that that's necessary at this level. However, anecdotal evidence suggests that there may be some organized funding of some of these anarchists, the small groups of people at these otherwise peaceful protests who have no respect for the rule of law and who are alleged to have being paid by left-wing type organizations to go out there and wreak havoc. It just remains to be seen. I think that the jury is still out, so to speak, on this, and we'll just have to wait and see. It's probably a little premature to start characterizing these people in these groups as being part of organized crime. But look, the fact of the matter is, including references to RICO in some of these statutes to get control of this situation is only going to be a concern to those who are doing something wrong. So, it's probably not that big of a problem actually putting it in the legislation at this point.
Gretchen.
I think it's horrifying. And first off, so these protest people who are not there, who don't really know what's going on, they refer to all of these as Black Lives Matters protests because people are carrying signs and wearing T-shirts that say Black Lives Matter. However, I don't believe that the actual Black Lives Matter Tampa organization has had a protest since June 13th. I know that they've been doing fundraisers. They've been handing out backpacks and school supplies to children. They haven't been organizing. And yet with this RICO statute, because people are out on the street, if they've got signs saying Black Lives Matter, what do we go back and charge the organizers of Black Lives Matter Tampa just because their slogan's being used? I mean, I think it's far reaching, and I don't think that it's going to be constitutional. I think it's a way for the government to try and shut the organizers up. Basically, they're trying to silence them. They're trying to frighten them and get them out of the streets and make them shut up.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think that the RICO reference is an effort to get control if what is being purported to be going on, that some billionaires out there are funding some of these anarchists, that there will be a paper trail. People who are merely just going out to protest as a member of Black Lives Matter or any other organization for that matter have no worry about being involved in protests, even involved in protests that because of a few bad apples end up getting violent, unless they are party to that violence or if they are taking funding from groups that are actually there to support and create havoc and break laws. It basically amounts to, if you're not doing anything seriously wrong, you're not going to have any repercussions. You don't have anything to be concerned about. But if you're involved in an organization that's getting funding to create dangerous situations, to violate people's rights, to damage public property, etc., then you might ought to be a little bit concerned. And that's a good thing, because we need to take back our streets by people knowing and understanding that we are a nation of laws and the rule of law must prevail, or we have anarchy, and we can't stand for that.
You know what? We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. You guys were great, both of you. It was interesting to see there are some things that you both agree on. You do. You all.
Katie, I will say I'm non-party affiliated.
Me too.
Just because I represent protesters, I'm not liberal. I'm more the get the hell off my lawn type of person. I don't want the government interfering with me.
And you know what? Before we went on live, I said, I hope this is a vigorous conversation, and within minutes, man, it got fiery. I appreciate both of you. I do. You're always welcome on anytime. I appreciate both of you. Floridians, you need to be in the loop. This is on Governor DeSantis's website. He just published it. I got the copy from his social media page, the governor's public social media page. Let's see. I just want to touch upon, just read it so that to inform the public Floridians here. Even there's legislation that would affect people coming from out of state here to involve, participate, organize. So those of you that live outside of Florida that are coming here for protest related activities, you also need to know. So let's see if there's anyone that
Hey, if I could just in closing out here, just offer to Gretchen, you're welcome on my lawn anytime. Come over, we'll have a beer and debate the issues, and we
I
probably
love that.
agree more than we disagree. I would imagine. All right.
I like that, Chris. Props to you. I like that a lot. I like that. Well, listen, that's something that I hope is fostered in our country. We're all Americans. We disagree at times. We can have fundamental disagreements, ideological, but come on, let's try to. We're doing something patriotic when we try to unite nonetheless, even though we have disagreements, because we do have shared common goals and interests. We're Americans. This is our country. Let's try to unite and be civil to one another. So props to you, Chris. Proud of you. And Gretchen, you're a good soul too. Both of you are good souls. You're passionate. Both of you are passionate. Government employment benefits terminates state benefits and makes anyone ineligible for employment by state local government if convicted of participating in a violent or disorderly assembly. That's one that I didn't touch upon. I don't know how either of you feel about that.
And I would say to that, look, I understand the intent of what they're trying to do here, but to cherry pick which crimes you're going to be denied a government job for, I think is a dangerous precedent. I would have to say, I mean, look, I understand the intent. They're trying to get a handle on a situation that is completely out of control and needs to be stopped. But doing so in this manner, I think, is unacceptable.
I think you would agree with that, Gretchen. Nothing different on that.
No, nothing different. And
Okay.
I just want to say that the protests, I know they've been going on for 6 months now in Tampa. They have actually affected a lot of change. I am on a working policy group with the NAACP, Sheriff Cronester, Chief Albano from Temple Terrace, Chief Duncan from Plant City, Chief Dugan from TPD, Chief Daniels from USF. And we're on a working group together creating policies so that no matter where you are in Hillsborough County, the law is going to be the same. And we've already had the police, all of the departments agreed on the duty to intervene, which was a very big thing. We've already seen somebody fired from Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office after his colleagues turned him in. We also have somebody from HCSO who is currently under investigation for inappropriate social media posts. So the protests have been successful in Tampa. We are moving forward. The mayor has had a policy group. Today, I spent about 6 hours in a city council meeting today discussing the changes to the Civilian Review Board, which is a civilian board where people can go to with police complaints and have those reviewed. So there have been a lot of policy changes that are going in the right direction. The protests are making a difference. I know that people are getting tired of them, but it's a change that needs to be done. And I think the three of us are blessed enough to live in areas of our community where we don't see police brutality.
Okay.
I've never been stopped on my bicycle on Bayshore, and I've had the same bike for 20 years and I don't have bike lights.
Well, I've had bad encounters, which I'm not going to go into now.
Okay.
But it is what it is, and I'm glad that the needle is moving forward, Gretchen, with your participation with law enforcement officials. Good. If anything could come out of bad situations here and there, that's good. And listen, I'm for the message of directing attention to some of what we're seeing in our country. Disparity, racial disparity. That's not the topic of tonight. It was the proposed legislation, but there's still problems. We're not a perfect nation, okay? And so Lindsay Camacho, thanks for weighing in. Haiti, you make a great point. Wow, that's always nice to hear because I have my detractors and haters, so that's always a nice compliment. We are all Americans. The problem is people have forgotten that, and what is being taught in schools is that Americans are terrible people and need to be punished. This is a great country, and we are a good people. Are we perfect? No, we're not. We have things in our history that, through the progression of our country, there's been some horrible history. But my parents fled from Cuba, embraced this country. This country opened its doors to them when they were seeking freedom from an oppressive regime. I love this country. They taught me love this country. When I grew up in Hialeah, what do we have now? The president of our country considering a Cuban American woman who grew up in my city, Hialeah, went to my alma mater, FIU, and that's amazing. I'm so proud. Even I might not even agree with some of the things that she like with the Elian Gonzalez. She was the attorney for Elian Gonzalez back when we all remember that story. So, but isn't that something amazing in this country that can happen? So proud that she's even being considered. You can do that. You can get there through hard work, and just making right life decisions. You can do that. So, anyways, I think I've covered everything that there is to cover. Let's just try to respect at least one another, if not love one another. We're Americans. We're humans. People over politics.
Amen.
Let's try to make this country better. No matter, we're always going to. Things can always improve. Things can always be better. Let's preserve our Constitution. It's a good thing. This is a wonderful country. I love my country. Um, so I think I have everything. Do you want to say anything to wrap this up, Chris? And thank you again for taking your time from your busy schedule to join me and Gretchen to have this important conversation. It's good for our community to ponder upon these issues and think about it and be informed, because this is potentially going to be legislation that our legislators, our representatives, this is a representative republic, they're going to consider and fight about up in Tallahassee. So we need to get in contact with our representatives, our senators, to tell them what our ideas are, our thoughts on this proposed legislation. So I'm going to let you have a few minutes to wrap up, Chris, and then if you want to say anything also in fairness, Gretchen, to you, we can wrap up this.
Yeah, no, I would close just kind of repeating what you said. We're all Americans. We need to find a way to get back to civil discourse, respect for one another. We need to bring back discipline in our schools, and we need to end this lawlessness in our streets. And then we can all try to sit down and talk and discuss and hold hands and figure out the problems that our nation is facing. We're not going to do it by screaming and yelling at each other, whether it's on television or if it's out in our streets. But we are a nation of laws. I think that the majority of what Governor DeSantis is proposing is a reaction to the lawlessness that we've seen, and that if we don't maintain the rule of law and end this lawlessness, we are headed to hell in a handbasket. And look, the next time this lawlessness is going on, it might be something that you oppose. And yet there are people out in the streets burning things down and blocking roads and inconveniencing you, and you might not agree with it. It's easy to be for something when it doesn't affect you, but the tables might be turned the next time. And we need to apply the law, and we need to apply it equally and universally. And I understand that is the basis for what we're having these protests for in the first place, that a lot of people feel like they are not treated equally and fairly. And in many cases, that is the case, and that needs to end. And we're all in agreement with that. And we just need to sit down and have civil discourse as opposed to civil disobedience.
That's a good word. Gretchen.
Thank you. I think, well, first I will say that the right to protest the government is a fundamental right under the U.S. Constitution. So I firmly believe, and this country has a history of revolutions that happened after protests. Look at the Boston Tea Party, the Whiskey Rebellion, Harper's Ferry, the Civil War, on and on and on. This country has a history of protests. And I think that what we need to do as a community is to listen to each other. I think that's the policy group with the police chief says, great, because we're actually expressing and sitting down and listening to each other. So when you see a protest, and the adorable little old lady that came out of CVS on Swan and Howard and asked me what was going on, why were these people in the street, what were they talking about, and then stood and listened to the people. That's what you do. You don't get angry and say, oh my God, they inconvenienced me. I need to drive over 2 blocks and go around. Why don't you just get out of your car and talk to people? The protests I've seen, these people they're not riots. They're not going to beat you up. Stop and talk to people. Ask them why they're angry. When you see Jay Passmore, ask her, Jay, what do you think that we need to do to change? Why are you protesting? Talk to people, get to know your neighbors. We're a community. And it saddens me when I talk to some of my neighbors and friends, and they have no interest. They really don't care what's going on with the protests. And they tell me, well, it doesn't affect me. I'm a white woman, or I'm a white man in South Tampa. I don't really care what they're protesting about. Police don't brutalize me. But, there's a point that we're a community and we need to take care of each other. Absolutely. So if there are neighborhoods in our community that are being over-policed, where people are being treated poorly by the government, we need to listen to them and fight for their rights, because they have a right to be safe and secure in their persons and not to be harassed by police just as much as we do in the other neighborhoods of Tampa.
Okay, thank you, Gretchen. Thank you, Chris. Heidi Oropesa with Florida U Judge. Thanks for tuning in and watching tonight. Stay tuned for other good conversation and discussion on important topics. Have a great evening, everyone.
Have a good night. Thanks.
Thank you.